Most people think $100,000 is just a bigger pile of money. I do not. I think it is the first time money begins to behave like an employee instead of a souvenir. That is the difference. And that is why the first 100,000 matters so much. Not because 100,000 makes you rich. Not because it solves every problem. Not because the world suddenly bows to you once you hit that number. It matters because it is usually the first moment in a person's life when capital begins to move fast enough to change his psychology. Before that, almost everything feels manual. You work, you get paid, you pay bills, you try to save, you try not to backslide, you hope, you worry, you make a little progress, then life takes a bite out of it, and you do it all again. That is how most people live for years. They are not stupid, they are not lazy, they are simply living in the part of the financial journey where effort still matters more than momentum. That is why the first 100,000 is different. It is the point where momentum starts helping. I have watched this happen over and over again. A person struggles to save the first 10,000. The next 10 takes discipline too. Then maybe the account grows to 30 or 40. Still hard, still fragile, still easy to interrupt. Then something changes. By the time that person is approaching 100,000, the game starts to look different. The contributions still matter, of course, but the compounding begins to become visible. The account is no longer just receiving deposits. It is beginning to do a little work of its own. That is when confidence changes. That is when options change. That is when the future stops looking like a wall and starts looking like a road. That is why I care about this number. It is the first taste of financial leverage for ordinary people. Your source document understood that. Well, it says directly that saving 100,000 is not just a random number, but a tipping point. And once you cross it, everything changes. It also says that after the first 100,000, money starts working for you, your investments compound faster than your paycheck, your confidence grows, and you gain more options. Faithfulite, Turn 31 file, 4Fe, that is exactly right. But let me crush one of the most dangerous myths tied to this subject. The myth is that the answer is simply earning more. Now listen carefully. Earning more is wonderful. I have spent my life telling people to earn more. I believe deeply that the ability to increase your income is a skill, not a miracle. I think it can be learned. I think it should be learned. I think too many people cap themselves mentally because they have decided their income is fixed when it is often more flexible than they realize. But income alone does not make people rich. In many cases, it does not even make them feel safe. The source says this too, and it says it very clearly. It knocks down the myth that if you just earn more, your money problems would disappear, then explains that many high earners still feel as if they never have enough, because the way they feel about money is often disconnected from how much they actually make. It even points out that 1 in 3 households earning between $100,000 and $150,000 still worry about paying bills. File a site, Turn 31 file 4Fe, that does not surprise me at all, because I have seen the same pattern in person for years. When people imagine having more money, they rarely imagine what that money could become if left alone and invested intelligently. They imagine what they could consume. A larger house, a better car, a bigger vacation, a more expensive school, a nicer version of normal. That is how income gets vaporized. The world will offer you endless opportunities to spend every raise you get. It will never have trouble inventing new categories of necessary comfort once your salary rises. That is why income alone will not save you. If your structure does not change, a larger income often only produces a larger form of the same financial chaos. That is why I have always said the real problem is not just earning. It is what you do with what you earn. And the answer begins with systems. I like systems because systems are honest. Systems do not care whether you feel motivated on Wednesday. Systems do not care whether you read a good quote about money on Sunday night. Systems do not care whether you are having a disciplined season or a sloppy one. A good system keeps moving even when you are a little tired, a little distracted, or a little emotional. That is why I believe so strongly in building money architecture instead of depending on noble intentions. The source document names this architecture the CEO system, and I think that is a useful frame. It breaks it into cutting costs, earning more, and optimizing your finances. That is a smart structure because it avoids 2 common mistakes. The first mistake is thinking you can cut your way to wealth. The second is thinking you can earn your way to wealth without ever building control. Both are incomplete. File site, Turn 31 file. 4Fe, let us start with cutting costs. This is the part people either romanticize or despise. The misers turn it into theater. The spenders reject it entirely. Both are wrong. I have never believed the rich life comes from drying paper towels and measuring beats or learning to feel proud because you suffered over every tiny purchase. That is not sophistication. That is often just anxiety wearing a moral costume. The source says this in a way I very much appreciate. It refuses the silly extreme version of frugality and instead says you should spend extravagantly on the things you love and cut costs mercilessly on the things you do not. Fay file a site, Fay turn 31, file 13, Fay, that is the correct principle. Money should reflect priorities. If you care deeply about travel, then perhaps travel should get real room in your life. If you care deeply about healthy food, perhaps that deserves space. If you care about beauty, comfort, kids, activities, generosity, or a few experiences that make your life feel rich, fine. But then I expect you to be just as ruthless in the areas that do not matter to you. That is what adults do. They decide, a lot of people say they love everything. They do not. They just do not want to make trade-offs. But wealth always asks for trade-offs. So does freedom. That is why conscious spending matters more than random deprivation. Now, once you have stopped leaking money mindlessly, you must address the biggest anchor in the whole structure: high-interest debt. This is the one place in the entire journey where speed truly matters. The source says this directly, and it is right. When your money is compounding for you, time is your ally. When debt is compounding against you, time is your enemy. High-interest debt is the opposite of wealth building. It is negative compounding attached to your life. Faithful site, Fay turn 31, file 13. Fay, that is why I have very little patience when people treat high interest debt as a side detail. It is not a side detail. It is a weight vest on your finances. If your credit card APR is 27%, you are not in a neutral situation. You are actively losing ground. The source gives this point in blunt terms too, saying that high credit card interest can wipe out the gains your investing plan is trying to create. Fay site, Fay turn 31, file 13, Fay, that is precisely the right way to think about it. You cannot build a compounding engine while the opposite engine is strapped to your back. So the first adult move is not to whine about debt. It is to look at it. Most people do not even do that. They know they have debt in the way a person knows the garage is messy. Vaguely, emotionally, avoidantly, but they have not listed the balances, the rates, the minimums, or the payoff timelines. They are paying what is in front of them, not controlling the structure. Another one of the uploaded files makes this point sharply. People stay stuck because they never fully list their debts, interest rates, and balances, and then choose a real payoff method. Fay file site, Fay turn 31, file 12, Fay, I agree. Completely. Fog is not a strategy. List it, then attack it, call the credit card companies, ask for lower rates, ask for temporary relief, move things if you can, pay extra where you must, and once the debt stops eating your future, every dollar that used to be trapped in interest can be redirected into savings and investing. That is when the machine gets a little stronger. Now let us move to what I think is the real secret in the whole process: automation. The source is especially strong here, and I am glad, because this is one of the most underrated tools in the entire world of personal finance. It describes an automation flow where money arrives by direct deposit, then automatically moves into savings and investing before you even get the chance to spend it, leaving the rest for guilt-free spending. It even says something that many people need to hear: automation is not just lazy, it is powerful. Fay file site, Fay turn 31, file 4, Fay turn 31, file 7, Fay, that is exactly right. Most people think discipline is the answer. Discipline is useful, but discipline is fragile. Systems are stronger. If you rely on manual transfers, memory, mood, and monthly motivation, your plan will eventually break. You will get sick, travel, get busy, have a bad month, or simply not feel like dealing with it. The file about the $75,000 income bracket makes this point plainly too. Automating your finances is one of the most profitable decisions you can make, because manual systems fail under ordinary life conditions. Fay file site, Fay turn 31, file 10, Fay, that is why I prefer money to move before I am tempted. It is why I believe in paying yourself first. It is why I want saving and investing to be treated like core obligations, not optional leftovers. Once money leaves the checking account automatically, you stop making the same decision every week. The system has already decided. That removes friction. And friction is one of the greatest destroyers of wealth. A lot of people spend years trying to optimize budgeting apps, tracking every tiny category, and staring at dashboards. The source has a sly but important point here too. It says that if your system is set up correctly, spending less time manually tracking every little detail can actually help over the long term. Fay file site, Fay turn 31, file 4, Fay. I believe that because the point of money is not endless supervision. The point of money is to serve your life. If your architecture is strong, then you can live. That is the rich life. Now, there is one tactic in your source that I particularly like because it is simple enough to be ignored and powerful enough to change everything. The 1% December increase. I think this is brilliant. The source explains it clearly. If you are investing 10% of your income now, add 1% every December. It is small enough that you barely feel it. But because it applies to income that is hopefully growing over time, the actual dollars keep scaling upward. Some brokerages even let you automate these annual increases. Fay file site Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay turn 31 file 5 Fay. This is how wealthy people often build without drama. Not through giant heroic changes, through small ratchets. A 1% annual increase is the kind of move ordinary people can survive. It does not require a vow of poverty. It does not require a spiritual awakening. It requires a calendar reminder and a willingness to become slightly stronger every year. That compounds just as money compounds. Habits compound too. Now let us talk about the moat. I like this section in your source very much because it turns emergency savings into a structural concept rather than a vague piece of advice. The source recounts Warren Buffett saying Berkshire Hathaway was set up so it would never run out of money, then uses that to introduce the idea of building a personal financial moat. 3 to 6 months of living expenses, accessible, predictable, not invested there, to protect you against life. Surprises, Fay file site, Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay. That is a very good metaphor. Because life will attack medical bills, job loss, repairs, family issues, things you did not schedule. The moat exists so one surprise does not force you to dismantle the entire kingdom. Too many people invest aggressively without protecting the structure around the investments. Then the first emergency comes, and suddenly they are selling investments, adding debt, panicking, or doing all three. That is not a moat. That is a costume. The emergency fund is the real thing, and it must be liquid. Another uploaded file reinforces this by saying your emergency fund should sit in a high-yield savings account, not in risky investments, and notes how psychologically important it is even to cross the first $1,000 line. Fay felicite Fay turn 31 file 6 Fay. That is correct. $1,000 is not wealth, but it is breathing room. Breathing room changes behavior. Then the moat grows, then the investments can do their real job. And what is that job? Not entertainment, not status, not endless conversation. Their job is to compound. This is why the Source S recommendation of low-cost index funds and target date funds is so strong. It explains what they are, why they are diversified, why they are low cost, and how they quietly do the work without constant meddling. It also makes an excellent point about fees, walking through how the difference between a 0.2% fee and a 1% fee can cost nearly $400,000 over a long investing lifetime. Fay file site Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay turn 31 file 5 Fay turn 31 file 9 Fay. This is one of the easiest ways people get robbed politely. Fees feel small. Decades make them enormous. That is why I have always preferred low-cost funds for the vast majority of investors. Index funds are not exciting. But excitement is overrated, and target date funds are especially useful for people who need a set and forget it option that becomes more conservative with age. The source says exactly that too. Fay file site, Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay turn 31 file 5 Fay. That is how real wealth often gets built. Quietly, automatically, without drama, without pretending you can outsmart everything. Now let me say something that people often do not want to hear. You should stop asking broke people for money advice. The source says this bluntly, and I am glad. Not because poor people are morally inferior, they are not. But failed tactics do not become wise because they are common. If you surround yourself only with people who normalize chaos, debt, panic, and financial drift, then all of that starts to feel standard. You need exposure to people and ideas that normalize building wealth in a calm, sustainable, long-term way. Fay file site Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay. That does not mean you need rich friends tomorrow. It means you need better inputs. Read better, watch better, study better. Let your standards change. And then protect yourself from the traps. Your source ends with several of them, and they are all real get-rich-quick fantasies. Toxic frugality, I missed my chance thinking. And the optimization spiral, I agree with everyone. Get-rich-quick content preys on pain. It sells speed to people who are tired. But speed is not the same as wealth. Wealth is usually built through systems that take time. The source says that clearly too, and it is correct. Real wealth is almost always built through smart systems, not through internet theatrics. Fay file site Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay toxic frugality is the opposite mistake. It mistakes suffering for wisdom. It tells people to make their life smaller and smaller as if deprivation were the goal. But the goal is not to win a contest in self-denial. The goal is to build a rich life. A rich life is one where you cut mercilessly in the places you do not care about so you can spend joyfully in the places you do. Again, the source got this exactly right. Fay Felicite Fay turn 31, file 13 Fay. Then there is I missed my chance. Nonsense, the best time would have been earlier. Fine. The second best time is now. The source says that too. And I believe it deeply. The mistake people made 10 years ago is one thing. The tragedy is making the same mistake again because they feel ashamed about the first one. Fay Felicite Fay turn 31 file 4 Fay, and finally optimization addiction. I smiled when I read that part because it is true. Some people spend their entire financial lives polishing tiny details while never building the big structure. They optimize coffee, calories, apps, account switches, tiny percentage edges, all while ignoring the actual architecture. Earning more, automating more, investing consistently, lowering fees, killing bad debt, and defining the rich life. Do not major in trivia, major in architecture. That is what I would say if I had to compress the whole thing into one line. Architecture beats intensity. The first 100,000 is not built by obsession. It is built by structure, conscious spending, more income where possible, debt removal, automation, annual ratchets, emergency protection, low-cost compounding, and the refusal to be distracted by theatrical nonsense. That is how the machine gets built. And once the machine is built, the game begins to change. At first you are feeding it, then it starts helping you. Then one day, if you stay with it, it begins to do work that used to require your labor. That is why the first 100,000 matters so much. It is not just money. It is the first time you can see with your own eyes that the machine is real. And once you see that, it becomes much harder to go back to living as if every dollar must always come only from your next paycheck.